Our first presenter tonight is Coach Stewart Scott. Stewart has coached swimming in Vancouver for the past 10 years and has helped thousands of clients become more comfortable in the water. He grew up in Scotland, close to the Loch Ness Monster, and was a competitive swimmer in his teenage years. A love of competitive swimming was rekindled in 2016 when Stewart created a new swim team that went on to win medals at the Canadian Nationals and then qualify for the Worlds in Korea. Today, Stewart feels that he is this close to swimming faster as an adult than he ever did as a teenager. Tonight, Stewart will be talking about swimming safely in open water. Stewart?
Hi guys, thanks very much for the intro, Patrick. So I guess I need to share my screen. Can someone just confirm if that's displaying? Yeah, and the audio is all good?
You're good, you're good.
Perfect. So yeah, I've been coaching in Vancouver for the past 10 years. I'm very fortunate that I've built a very solid client base over that time, and this is actually a full-time job for me. So I'm very happy to be here and be asked by VOWSA to present. One thing I would like to kind of mention up front is obviously the last year and a bit with COVID has been challenging, with the pools being closed and capacity restricted. But as a kind of upside to COVID, and maybe you're all aware, but open water swimming has really seen a huge increase in popularity. So thank you for being on the webinar tonight, so we can talk about how to swim safely in the oceans and lakes. It is unfortunate that if you check the news during the summer, there will be frequent reports of water-related accidents and drownings and whatnot. So the more information we can put out there before the season begins, then the more we can share and spread and hopefully prevent that going forward. So I wanted to start tonight with figuring out how to change the screen. Oh, why is that not working? There we go. So yeah, I wanted to start tonight with my definition of what a beginner open water swimmer would be. And I think it really comes down to three things. You're looking at your existing ability. So some people that are looking to get into open water swimming might not be the strongest pool swimmers. Maybe you don't have a competitive background. I like to kind of use the term adult onset swimmer, someone who's perhaps learned to swim as a kid, but then not really done much in the last 10, 15, 20 plus years. But then equally, a beginner open water swimmer could also be someone who has a lot of competitive pool swimming experience, but has never been out into the ocean. And then we've got experience level as well. You know, how much time you spend in the ocean or in the lakes is obviously going to define how your comfort level and your confidence and the type of swims that you're going to take on. And then finally, and I think this is one that probably a lot of people might not think about, but I would also include location in defining a beginner. I do a lot of my swimming at Jericho, so I'm pretty comfortable swimming there. That's where we do all our coaching. But if I was to go to a different location, I would consider myself a beginner until I really started to understand how the tides and the current and the weather typically impact the conditions of that area. I would also say that just in terms of having a mindset, I would like people to consider themselves either as a beginner, or I would only consider myself an intermediate open water swimmer. I just think it's a dangerous position to consider yourself experienced or expert, just from a point of view of complacency creeping in. So with that, Pool swimming and open water swimming are, in my mind, two very different activities. Yes, it's still typically the same body movements, but the environment and the conditions are completely different. I like to compare it as road cycling versus downhill mountain biking. So ideally, you're going to learn how to swim in the pool first, and then take those skills out into the open water. And for some people, that's going to go one of two ways. If you do a lot of pool swimming,
Jay, can you help? Yeah.
Everyone's mic's on. If you do a lot of pool swimming, then turning at the walls can be an opportunity to stop and rest. And quite often, actually, that opportunity to rest is not always needed. So when you get out into the ocean, a lot of people find that after a couple of swims, they can actually swim a whole lot further than they expected they would be able to. And then with the wetsuit helping with the buoyancy and less of a drag issue, then swimming in the open water can actually be easier. That would be assuming the conditions are equal, so a nice calm flat water, perhaps in a lake.
Hey, are you a Zoom expert?
But then obviously if the conditions in the ocean are a little bit more challenging, if there's wind and chop, then that's when open water swimming becomes a little bit more troublesome.
Yeah, I did that and it didn't do anything.
Can someone message Tabitha and turn that off?
Can we find that person who's saying a few things and have them be muted? Is that possible?
Okay, I think we're good. So when we did the seminar last year, one thing that I just kind of happened to say, I didn't really think about it, was that anything that can happen can also happen in the water. And I think that's a really good mindset to take into open water swimming, especially if you consider yourself to be already a decent swimmer. There can definitely be a little bit of overconfidence in the concept that I can swim already, so I'm going to be fine. When there's so many variables outdoors that it's not always that way. So I'm going to talk about kind of three things tonight in terms of open water safety. First one being what you can look at pre-swim to make sure that you're prepared and safe. Second one, during the swim, and then the last one, just some things to consider for after the swim. So the very first thing I would say is to never swim alone. I quite often hear that, you know, I'm going out for a swim and my friend is on the beach and they're going to be watching me and I'll be fine.
Can you try to minimize
but
all
a
those
swimmer,
participants? Maybe there's something behind. Like if you push it down.
I'll just wait for a second. Someone on the beach who's watching you is going to be absolutely useless in any type of emergency situation. By the time they actually get to you, it might be too late. So please never swim alone. Always go out there with a friend, someone that can watch you and that you can watch as well. And then make sure to plan your route and stick to your route. Don't make kind of last minute changes when you're out in the water. And speak to the lifeguards. If you're at a lifeguarded beach, not everywhere is lifeguarded obviously, but try to speak to the lifeguards and get some information on the tides, on the currents, on any hazards that are around, any watercraft that you might need to look out for. And then the last thing I would say, just in terms of preparation, is allow yourself to stop and take a rest and actually enjoy where you are. I see a lot of swimmers, especially people that are looking to do triathlons, just get their head down and try to get a workout in. And that's, that's got a place as well. But, just especially where we are, just take your time and enjoy the different view that you're going to get from the ocean. So in terms of equipment, I've got this picture of myself here. I like to call this the often spotted swim dork. So a few key things we're looking for, mainly for warmth and for visibility. So swimming with a wetsuit is highly recommended. The buoyancy of the wetsuit is going to make swimming a little bit easier, but it also gives you a little bit of safety in that you're not going to be able to sink if you have a wetsuit on. And obviously it's going to keep you warm. The swim cap, this got my purple cap on here. You're going to lose a lot of warmth through your head. So as well as being a little bit more visible, it's going to keep you warm. And then these swim buddies, they've only been around for probably the last 4 or 5 years. They're fairly new, but they're very lightweight. You just blow some air into them, and you can wrap it around your waist, as you can see here, and just tow it along behind you. And if you're using a swim buddy, just make sure that you adjust the length of the strap so that you're not kicking the swim buddy, because that can get really annoying. But really good for visibility. I'll show you a picture later. And you can also stop and kind of rest on the swim buddy as well. So it's not officially rated as being a kind of rescue aid, but it is very, very useful. Actually, and this one here, this is the larger one. So you can put like sandwiches and your phone and your shoes or whatever. So if you want to swim across the lake, you can carry all that stuff with you and then walk back, or gives you some options. And then the last one is a whistle. So I like to attach the whistle to the zipper of my wetsuit, because then I know as long as I'm wearing my wetsuit, I always have it with me. You could attach it to the swim buddy, and if you have mobility issues, like some people won't be able to reach the zipper, so then put it on your swim buddy or tuck it into the arm underneath the wetsuit. So that's it kind of for equipment. I know that there's probably some people here that won't want or won't like to swim with a wetsuit. And that's totally fine. If you're in that boat, then just make sure you take a swim buddy with you, so you do have something to lean on for buoyancy if you need to stop and rest. I actually don't particularly like swimming with a wetsuit. As a pool swimmer, I'm used to feeling the water moving across my body. So when you put the wetsuit on, I don't feel that. So just my feel for the water, the way that I move, it just doesn't feel the same. So I completely understand if you don't want a wetsuit. So then outside of what you can do yourself, there's all the environmental factors that you want to consider before getting into the water. I'll show you a slide in a moment with some more details about the hazards. The water temperature is obviously the key one that I think everyone automatically thinks about. So a couple of things I want to say on water temperature. First one would be, I would consider anything under 15 degrees to be cold water. I just checked earlier, and the water temperature for today is 13. So I would consider that to be pretty cold. Definitely, unless you're trained and acclimatized and not wearing a wetsuit, you're going to want to have a wetsuit. Some people at that temperature might even want to have gloves and boots on as well. And then you can also get neoprene hats too. So under 15 degrees, you're probably want to at least consider some extra equipment. Between 15 and 18 or 19 degrees, then you're probably going to get away with just the wetsuit and be comfortable. And then above 19 degrees, that's sometimes when actually, especially if it's a nice day, when wearing a wetsuit, can almost feel like it's too warm. So 19 degrees, probably July, mid-July. August is going to be very comfortable. And then the air temperature can actually really impact how you perceive the water temperature to be. So if the air temperature is warmer than the water temperature, then when you first get in, like on a really warm sunny day, then that water is going to feel a little bit colder. And then vice versa as well. If it does happen now and then during the summer where you'll get a kind of cooler gray day, maybe it's been raining. And sometimes in your mind, you're like, oh, do I really want to get into the water? And you'll actually get in and you'll find that the water is warmer than the air temperature. So that's always a really nice realization. Other things to consider, the tide and the currents. I found through the courses that we teach that a lot of people don't necessarily understand that tide and current are different things. So the tide is just the general movement of the water, typically in or out. But there can also be lots of local currents that maybe act in different direction to the tide. And most of that is based upon the geography of wherever you're going to swim. So again, I'll show you a slide in just a moment that will help understand that for Jericho. And then the other factor would be wind. The last couple of days have been really windy here, so that's going to create a lot of chop and quite a lot of waves on the surface. Typically, Vancouver, because we're quite protected with Vancouver Island, we don't get like crazy big kind of waves or chop or wind. We're fairly protected in here, but if you see that the water is really bumpy, then it's usually the wind that's creating all that chop. And then the last one, and I think there's been a couple of questions about this, wildlife. I know from the swimmers, especially the beginner swimmers in the courses that we run, seals comes up quite often. And then there's usually a question about orcas and humpback whales as well. So yeah, seals, there's definitely plenty of seals around. I have never been in a situation where a seal has come too close to me. Usually if they are around, they'll pop their heads up and they're very curious and very inquisitive. They'll pop their heads up and have a look around, usually from a safe distance, like 5-10 meters away. Some people have said that they've kind of had seals come closer or maybe even had a seal kind of brush against them. That's not something I've experienced, so it certainly doesn't happen very often. And then the orcas or other whales that come in, I mean, yeah, they rule the water, right? So they're big and they're fast. But to my knowledge, there's never been a report of an orca attacking a swimmer. It's often said that because we're covered in neoprene, we kind of look like seals. So you kind of get worried that maybe the orcas would go for a swimmer, but I've never heard a report of that. And I do know that there is a company in Norway that does kind of sightseeing, like snorkeling, diving trips with orcas. And actually we were out swimming last week up in VOWSA up near Squamish, and saw some orcas and got into the water, and it was obviously totally fine because I'm still here. So these next couple of slides, I do have a blog post on the website that will explain this in a little bit more detail. I am conscious that we're a little bit short on time. So just a couple of hazards. This is for Jericho. You know, the same ideas would apply to any beach that you're going to swim at. These hazards can be visible at low tide, but not visible at high tide. So for example, these rocks out on the west side of Jericho near the pier, at low tide, that's not a problem because they'll be on the sand, so you're not going to swim into them. At high tide, the water's high enough that you can actually just swim. Most of the time you can swim right over the top of them. But when the tide is not at its highest point, that's when these are most likely a danger, that you could swim into them and you're not going to see them. Similarly, like I think most of the Vancouver beaches are going to have rafts, which will be kind of little play centers for the kids. Basically, they can jump off and swim out to them and whatnot. But when you're swimming and you're kind of face down or just eyes out of the water, those can be really difficult to see. So just make sure you know where any rafts or buoys or docks are. And then same with the rocks over on this side at Jericho. At high tides, those rocks actually extend quite far out into the water. So you just want to be cautious to know what's around. So this is just an illustration based on my experience of 10 years at Jericho, of typically how the water flows during an incoming tide. So because Jericho is a bit of a bay, typically the water is going to fill in around the bay here. And then on an incoming tide, we'll usually see the water moving from east to west, so towards Jericho Pier. Now, if you're swimming east to west, then that's great. You're going to have a slight assist. If you're swimming the other way, then you're going to be going into the current. That's going to be a little bit harder or longer for you. The thing that you should really pay attention to is out here. So as the water kind of wraps around, you can get quite strong currents going out past Jericho Pier. We can also get strong currents kind of bouncing back from the pier. So even though you might have a current, if you're swimming this direction, you might have a current against you here and a much stronger current pushing you further out. And then an outgoing tide, not so many currents on an outgoing tide. The one thing that can be a little confusing though is even though the water is going out, you can often get an incoming current. So as the main mass of water is pushing out, that leaves a void back here, whereas some of the water is going to flow back in. So yeah, that can be a little confusing. And these markers, this is a typical swim route at Jericho, these orange markers. So it can be a little confusing in here sometimes during a low tide. Okay, I'm conscious I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to go through this part a little bit faster. I would say anything under 18 degrees, when you actually get into the water, you want to take a couple of minutes to acclimatize, just to limit or reduce the impact of cold water shock. So most people probably have experienced this at some point, where you get into the water and you tighten up, you tense up, you hold your breath because the water is cold. So if you start swimming straight away, all that tension and breath holding is really going to catch up to you in that first couple of minutes. So I would encourage everyone, if it's 18 or under, just to lie on your back and float for a few minutes, just to give your body a chance to get used to the water temperature. Put your face into the water, blow some bubbles, and that will get your face used to being a little bit cooler. And after a couple of minutes, you can go ahead and start swimming. Signs of hypothermia. This picture was taken, this was actually in December a couple of years ago. There's snow on the beach, and you can see I'm pretty cold. But even in the summer, some people are going to get numbness in their fingers and their toes, and maybe a little bit of shivering. I would say that's a fairly normal response and not something to be terribly worried about. If you take a look at your fingers and they're starting to go pale or waxy, or if you squeeze your fingers and the blood is not returning, then that's a sign that you're probably going to want to stop. And on this day, when it was snowy, I was having trouble talking. And so when you're struggling to form words, then you're kind of starting to get into the trouble zone and need to get out. Other common issues, I won't spend too much time on this. The cold water can definitely encourage cramping in the toes and your calves. Choking on the water, swallowing the water, not the nicest thing, but usually not too much of a problem unless it goes into your lungs. Sometimes the wave and the chop is going to make people feel a little bit sick and dizzy. And then sometimes, now and then, you're going to run into things. You're going to, put your hand into a big pile of seaweed or some debris, small logs, hopefully not big logs, and you will definitely run into other people. There's no getting around that. And then post swim, I'm going to summarize this one very quickly. Get dry and put on clothes and have something to eat and drink. That's pretty much it. If you have been in very cold water for a long time, you might have heard of afterdrop. That's when your core temperature continues to get colder even though you're out of the water. That's definitely a serious situation. Probably not something that most people are going to deal with if you're swimming in the summertime and you're not out there for multiple hours. Okay, I think I've got 1 minute. So 2 things I want to mention on just technique for open water swimming. One of them in this picture here, this was at the Sasamat Canada Day swim a couple years ago. When you're looking forward, just try not to lift your head out too far. Anytime you lift your head up, your legs are going to sink. That's going to make things a whole lot harder for you. And especially if the water is a little bit choppy, then try to get your hands out a little bit higher. That's going to give you some more clearance over the surface and going to allow your stroke to flow without kind of bumping into and getting put off by knocking the waves and the chop. And then, yeah, this is probably the last picture. These are the swim buddies. You can see this is a dull day, but those swim buddies very visible. Close up of the swim buddies. So yeah, definitely get yourself one. And I'll wrap it up with try and swim at sunset if you can, because you're going to get a beautiful view of Vancouver from the water. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Stewart. You timed that perfectly, and that was so interesting. It's amazing how 25 minutes can evaporate. But that was very, very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to provide a little background information before introducing the next 2 speakers. Swim, Drink, Fish is a non-profit organization that since 2001 has been working to help people connect with, better understand, and safeguard their local waters. And Fraser Riverkeeper, an initiative of Swim, Drink, Fish, is a charity dedicated to the protection and restoration of the Fraser River and its watershed, with a mission to ensure the right of all citizens to safely swim, drink, and fish in BC waters. One of our next co-presenters is Sadie Caron, the program manager for Fraser Riverkeeper. After completing her bachelor's in environmental science from McGill University, she has shared her knowledge and passion for conservation, public health, and water security through science, education, and communication with various organizations all across the country. Her diverse water experiences, including windsurfing the waters of Eagle Lake, floating down the Elbow River, canoeing on the North Saskatchewan, and testing the water quality of the Caribbean Sea in Barbados, have all helped to shape her deep connection to a swimmable, drinkable, fishable future for all. And presenting with Sadie is Imogen Broberg-Hull. Imogen is the water monitoring and communication coordinator for Fraser Riverkeeper. She has returned to her home in the Vancouver area after finishing a Bachelor of Community Design from Dalhousie University on the Atlantic coast. Rowing, kayaking, swimming, and gazing lovingly at sea creatures are her favorite activities to do by the water. Devoted to protecting all of our waters near and far, she's delighted to direct her passion for design, community, and the environment towards the cause of this cause that is so close to her heart. And now Sadie and Imogen will be talking about the quality of the water that we are swimming in. Is it clean? Is it safe?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. I'm just going to share my screen here. So hello, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be presenting today. So as mentioned, Imogen and I work for an organization called Swim, Drink, Fish, a national nonprofit dedicated to safeguarding our waters for all of us to enjoy. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about what we do, water quality in Vancouver, and how it affects you as water users. So before we begin, I'd just like to do I'd like to acknowledge that we are presenting today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Since time immemorial, they have been the stewards of the lands and waters upon which we live and work. So my name is Sadie Caron, and I am the program manager of Fraser Riverkeeper, and I'm joined by Imogen Broberg-Hull, who is our wonderful communications and water monitoring coordinator. Both of us wear many hats when it comes to water quality, and so hopefully we can bring some of our knowledge and experience today to talk a little bit about what we do and why it matters for you. So first, I'm going to do a little video here.
We are Fraser Riverkeeper. In 2004, we set out on a mission to ensure your right to safely swim, drink, and fish in BC waters. We blend science, law, education, and storytelling with technology to empower millions of people to know and safeguard their waters. We get our feet wet every week with our Vancouver water monitoring program. Year-round, we collect frequent, reliable data about the waters that so many Vancouverites enjoy on a regular basis. We are proud to publish our weekly results as raw data on our website and to Swim Guide in an accessible and easy to understand format. We work hard to ensure you have access to consistent, reliable data so that you're empowered to make informed decisions about when and where to get out on the water. We run free water literacy workshops for schools, community groups, and organizations across the Greater Vancouver area. We want to start a conversation about our water, where it comes from, how it flows, and how we can protect it. Through these workshops and events, we have collected over 3,000 stories for Watermark Project, with the goal of archiving how important clean water is to people across Canada. These stories stand as proof that Canadians care about our water bodies and are connected to the water that we so desperately need to preserve. We know that if you feel connected to water, you're more likely to protect it. We are dedicated to cleaning up our waters, holding polluters accountable, and empowering everyone to know their local water bodies. Become a citizen scientist and join the Swim, Drink, Fish movement. Learn more and sign up at fraserriverkeeper.ca.
So that's a good way to dive into what we do at Swim, Drink, Fish. So we have our community-based water monitoring hub, which the main purpose of is to provide the protection of public health from contaminated water. So we provide the public with current reliable water quality data on E. coli levels with the goal to prevent the spread of waterborne illnesses, making it easy for people to know when your water is contaminated and when it is clean for swimming. So our monitoring program right now, we focus on sampling those well-used recreational hotspots around False Creek. And the reason that we do this is because, unfortunately, sometimes we see these sorts of signs. So feel free to put in the chat. Have you ever seen a no swimming sign before? I'm sure that our open water swimmers probably don't like to see that sign very much, but it definitely pops up a lot of the time. And unfortunately, often it's due to contaminated waters. So our logo, you see in the bottom right corner there, we've removed those crosses. Our goal is to fight for swimmable, drinkable, and fishable waters for everyone. Why do we monitor water health? Well, because in Vancouver, our waters face several types of pollution. We have stormwater runoff, There's sewage overflows, there's large amount of trash, there's heavy boat traffic, antiquated plumbing on some boats. Some regions we get overpopulated wildlife, so those beaches with lots of geese, you might see some things on the beach that might be impacting water quality, and things like illegal dumping. So what we do is we collect data on things like E. coli levels, other water quality parameters, wildlife, water users, and other types of physical pollution, like just the floatable debris that we find. And our beaches and waters in Vancouver, unfortunately, face a particularly nasty form of pollution, sewage. Our infrastructure in Vancouver has not evolved at the same pace as our lifestyles. So we have a city lined with beautiful beaches, but we are still actively releasing untreated sewage into the waters that we recreate in. So enter combined sewers. These are pipes that run into the Burrard Inlet and the Fraser River and release untreated sewage and stormwater runoff that don't make it to the wastewater treatment plants. So instead of having those treatment plants sort of overflow into the streets or our homes, they overflow on those very rainy days into our water bodies. And so this can cause some very predictable problems, notably the overgrowth of E. coli. So on this map here, in blue, we've got the 3 sampling locations that we have, and then in orange, those are the CSO locations. So there are some other ones close to our beloved swimming beaches. So that's why we sample these locations year round. False Creek's definitely a hot spot and a hub for swimming. I don't think many people here have probably swam in False Creek because it's not designated for swimming. And then here is also a map looking at 2017's effluent from the combined sewer overflow. So you can see where they are located, and the size of the circle is how much they overflowed. So you can see that many of them unfortunately release millions of cubic meters of untreated wastewater near these popular places for swimming and recreation. So you might see them even on these dots here close to some of our beloved beaches that you've probably swam at before. In total, Vancouver has 39 known combined sewer outfalls, and they overflowed a cumulative 3,622 times in 2017, which released just over 39 million cubic meters of untreated wastewater and precipitation into receiving water bodies. The consequence of having raw sewage introduced into our water is the risk of exposure due to harmful contaminants like E. coli. It is known that beaches and recreational water located near combined sewer outfalls experience higher rates of closure due to unsuitable water quality. So here you can see this photo. This is at a beach at Sunset Beach in downtown Vancouver, which has closed consistently in the last few summers due to high E. coli counts. And this is unfortunately somewhat common at beaches during the warmer months. So I'm sure some of you are probably familiar, have probably heard of beach closures since you're such active swimmers. And basically these beach closures, they are to protect human health because swimming or being submerged in water polluted from bacterial contamination can cause illnesses, including hepatitis, gastroenteritis, as well as skin, wound, respiratory, and ear infections. So for the most part, waterborne illnesses result from swallowing polluted waters, which can definitely happen when you're, swimming. It can splash into your mouth. You might accidentally swallow it, but unfortunately, it can also be contracted from breathing in contaminated water vapors or from eating contaminated fish and shellfish. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Imogen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Imogen, and I'm the water monitoring coordinator for Fraser Riverkeeper. So how do you know which beaches are swimmable, and how do you report water pollution if you see it? This is what we will talk about today. So Swim Guide was created by Swim Drink Fish, and it's the most popular beach information service in the world. It's a free website and app that helps you to easily find the closest beaches and know at a glance which ones are safe for swimming. You can also report pollution and share these beaches with your family. So if you're on a computer or have a smartphone handy, I would recommend heading over to theswimguide.org to explore while we've kind of walked through how to use it. So Swim Guide is a growing network of affiliates who collect and upload public health and beach information so that we all have access to it for free. So it kind of consolidates a large amount of data. Thanks for posting that in the chat. When you open the app or website, a map will automatically show you your closest beaches and their water quality status, importantly. So on a beach page, you can see the latest water quality status, who collected it, and when it was collected. And if a beach hasn't been tested recently, you'll find a historical status telling you the percentage of the time that it has passed or failed water quality standards. So Metro Vancouver has not yet shared their early swim season data. They're out there collecting it, but it will be up for May long weekend once they've collected a full 5 weeks of data. That's when it'll get on Swim Guide. So for most beaches, you'll find detailed information on amenities, like if there's bathrooms or parking, and photographs so you know what to expect. So here's a shot, a really quick screenshot of Swim Guide in Vancouver. So if you're on the website right now, you can navigate over to this yourself and zoom in and out. It's very intuitive. You can see some of our favorites open water swimming locations on here. I tried to include most of them. So you'll see that there are these symbols and they will represent whether the water quality is good or poor, or the historical status of the actual beach. So that's what this slide's for. It's fairly intuitive. Yellow means the beach has passed 60 to 95% of the time. There's quite a few yellow beaches in Vancouver. You'll see, if you sign on there, you can kind of just see for yourself what it's all about. So, oh, I've skipped a slide. Fraser, Riverkeeper, and Metro Vancouver, thanks, Sadie. They followed the guidelines for Canadian recreational water quality. So if you're wondering the nitty gritty of how we determine if a beach has passed or failed, we use a recommended threshold, and this is what we use at Fraser Riverkeeper and what Metro Vancouver uses. And the threshold is a geometric mean, which is an average of 200 E. coli cells per 100 milliliters of water. So that's for 5 samples. And then if a single sample is over 400 E. coli per 100 milliliters, it's an automatic fail for that whole site. So even if you've collected 5 samples, if one of them fails, it's all failing. So on Swim Guide, we make it easy to understand, or as easy to understand as possible. And we show the green symbol when it passes and the red symbol when it fails. And there's a small print on there if you're wondering about the specific parameters that we use. So this is Kitsilano Beach. You can see that Kits has passed the water quality test 60 to 95% of the time. And if you scroll down, you can see the individual tests and when they were taken. So one of the best things about Swim Guide is that it gets its water quality updates from both government and non-governmental organizations with hundreds of affiliates worldwide. So it's not just Vancouver based. There are a lot in Victoria and all over the country. So here's the Fraser Riverkeeper site, Olympic Village. It's where I am every week grabbing water samples. So this shows the passing result from last week. And here we're highlighting the report pollution button on Swim Guide. So if you're at a beach on Swim Guide and see pollution, you can submit photographs to us and descriptions of the pollution for us to investigate and send to the appropriate authority. So how can you make an educated guess about sewage pollution if there are no recent water quality reports? Well, there's a few things that we've actually noticed when we're sampling, and that's on days that we have failing water quality standards. There's a few visual cues that you can look out for as a swimmer. So the water, if it has poor water quality, we've found more often than not the water is very cloudy. It might have discoloration like green, brown, or murky brown water, and that's not the suspended sort of sediment look that it's green brown and it's more often than not scummy on the surface and will kind of collect in areas that the current pushes it. So those are indicators that water health is compromised. And there's also some very obvious clues like condoms and tampon applicators, which people will often flush down toilets. So we generally advise that people stay out of the water downtown for 48 hours after a heavy rain event. because the combined sewage outflows are likely to divert their waste to water bodies after a heavy rainfall. So if you're looking for an opportunity to get involved with our work, we'd also like to extend the invitation to join us for water sampling and other projects that we have going down by the water. We have a website and you're welcome to reach out to myself. It can be some fun hands-on work and you guys are obviously in the water all the time. So if you're interested, you can get in touch with us about that. It's outdoor work as well, just to preface that with the COVID. So if you're interested in learning more about some of our findings, like the observations that I just talked about regarding water quality, we have our annual report launch coming up for the 2020 findings. So we'd like to invite you to that. It's on Wednesday, June 2nd, and you can find that on our social media, or you can find it on our events page on our website. And you can sign up for our newsletter as well, and that'll be going out via email. So we're going to talk about the E. coli levels over the past year, litter findings, garbage, pollution in general, water quality, and our projects that we have upcoming for 2021. Connect, collect, share, and restore. I think it's safe to say that if you're attending this webinar tonight, you have a strong personal connection with the water. And that's vital in ensuring our waters are protected and restored, truly caring about the health of the places that we hold dear. So we hope that some of this information and action items for ways that you can fight water pollution that we shared with you today can help strengthen that connection with water. Thank you everyone for your time tonight. I know there's quite a few questions that we weren't able to get through in our presentation, so we'll just take that moment now to answer some of those questions. I'll start with the first one. Is climate change having a negative impact on local water quality? So there are no local studies to confirm this, but rising ocean temperatures will likely contribute to higher levels of bacterial contamination, since bacteria like E. coli, which we measure, will be more likely to multiply and live longer in warmer waters. We always find that the E. coli levels are often off the charts on the days that we sample that have the highest water temperatures. So maybe Sadie and I can go opposite with these questions.
Yeah, I can take the next one that was submitted, which is, why is the water so murky in Kits and so crystal clear in Indian Arm? And this has to do largely with the current and the water flow. So areas like Spanish Banks and Kits will often receive river sediment from the Fraser River plume, which gets carried into the water from the estuary of the Fraser, but it doesn't make its way all the way back into the Narrows of Indian Arm. So I'll pass it back to Imi for the next one.
So we've got, is it safe to swim in the Fraser? This is quite the question. It's a personal choice. So it's based on your strength and awareness of water and just your general swimming skills. This is probably even a better question for Coach Stewart, but the Fraser River receives, from a pollution standpoint, effluent and industrial wastewater from a variety of sources along its path. It's a very, very long river, so there are a lot of sources. There's definitely water pollution present. So in the Lower Mainland, it's also a very busy industrial waterway. There's quite a few dangers when it comes to just how much boat traffic there is. And it moves at a very fast pace. Its current is very fast and it carries large debris, which you can't often see because the water is so murky, has a lot of sediment in it, in the water column. So we can never guarantee safety, since swimming in open water poses different risks, even depending on the day, let alone water temperature, debris, swimming ability, water clarity, and bacterial contamination. So Finn Donnelly famously swam the entire length of the Fraser, and it's very possible that there are folks in this call who have swam in the Fraser. So it's possible, but not without its risks.
Awesome. Yeah. And then the next question was, is it safe to swim during a red tide? How can you tell a red tide? So this is another awesome question that we might have seen red tides before. So you should be able to tell if there's an algal bloom by the color and the turbidity. So that's like the water clarity. And red tides have red, brown, or even a slightly purple hue to them. And they're usually very murky with poor visibility. So you can swim during red tide without facing serious risks. However, I think some people experience something like a burning sensation in your skin or eyes, so it might not be super fun. And bacterial levels are typically elevated during red tides, whether it's natural sources or not. So itchiness is often a pretty common outcome. And there's also different types of red tides. So I remember in 2018, there were all sorts of algal blooms of red tide. Like we got lots of people sort of submitting those pollution reports because they were really concerned about the water quality and whether or not it was super risky for human health. And there are different species of red tide. So that one was not a species that risks human health, but it can be toxic to fish, unfortunately, because it can clog their gills and cause them to suffocate. But it's not necessarily one that's toxic to like bivalve shellfish like mussels or clams. And these blooms can be caused by warmer temperatures. And I know that just seeing that bright color can be quite alarming. So it might just kind of not make you want to swim in it.
There's some good stuff in the chat going on about jellyfish. My favorite to see is the fried egg jelly. Love those guys. So the next question is, I am curious as to the water quality at New Brighton Park. So the waters surrounding New Brighton Park are not currently monitored by Metro Vancouver. I've heard about water quality concerns in that area. And if you look on that map that we showed way earlier, there are CSOs in that area. So I would, to whoever posed this question, I would reach out to Metro Vancouver and see if they would consider expanding their monitoring sites, because if there's a swimming area there, if they're, I mean, I'm sure they're aware, but just to kind of sort of extend that to them and say that there is demand for it, it would never hurt.
Yeah, and that goes for any beach. Like Metro Vancouver, they've got an incredible water monitoring program that runs throughout this from May to September. So if there are any beaches that you think should be a part because you're swimming there, they want to know. So if you reach out to them, like I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to have that information and make that decision about whether or not it's feasible to monitor. So the next question was about the accuracy of water quality tests at Vancouver beaches and what the accuracy of those water quality reports are. Now that's like a really, really good question. I'm sure that, you know, how am I to know like what's going on? So if you want to learn about the accuracy, you're definitely welcome to join us as volunteers to see what the process is like for us. It's very similar for Metro Vancouver. So we collect weekly samples from the spring to the fall, and then bi-weekly samples in the winter. And we use a pretty stringent standard operating procedure. So we have things called quality controls. So for example, at each site, we collect 5 samples. And then we calculate a geometric mean of those 5 samples to give like a really good example. Like if the water quality is really good at one side of the beach and really poor at the other, then being able to understand the entire health is super helpful. And then we also do things like temperature blanks, field blanks, duplicate samples every 10% of the samples taken. And then once Imogen's in the lab, she does all of the lab work. We use this system called IDEX, and we calculate for something called most probable number. So this is the same system as Metro Vancouver. So it's quite stringent. I mean, you never know, right? Like sometimes everything can go right and maybe that one sample isn't accurate, or they might not publish it. Like we don't publish it if there's a problem with the quality controls, because then that means that maybe there was something compromised along the way. Maybe there was, maybe somebody touched the inside of the whirl pack as they were scooping the sample, or maybe there was, I don't know, the cooler wasn't clean or the lab surface wasn't clean. So those, you know, those are all things that you have to consider that go into water quality reports, but typically those results won't be published if the results aren't correct. So the reason that we monitor, we're not trying to step on any toes, we're just trying to provide more data as well as that provided by Metro Vancouver. And the last question, I'll just hop in there and then maybe Imogen, you can put them in the chat, which was, what are the highest reliability sources of information to consult about water temperature and water quality? So in Vancouver, there's the Vancouver Coastal Health page, which has all of the information about recreational water quality tests. So that I think she'll be putting that in. I see in her Google Doc, she's highlighting it right now. So that's why I'm sorry if I'm making funny faces. And then, as I mentioned, there's the swim guide. So that's where you can find your local beaches. We also publish all of our results on the Fraser Riverkeeper website, and as raw data on the recreationalwater.ca/Vancouver. And I'd also like to mention, because temperature was something that came up very often in the questions, that on Swim Guide, we don't have yet a water temperature feature, but we're just launching our first beta in Toronto at Wards Island Beach. So we're really excited to be slowly introducing temperature, and we want to have more real-time temperature sensors so that we can provide that information for swimmers who are really curious about water temperature. So those are all the questions that had been sent beforehand. I don't know if there
if Patrick here, if I may jump in, there were just a couple of more questions. There was a 12 millimeters of rain the other day. How much rain triggers the likelihood of a sewer overflow? Or do you know? That's
a good question. There's not Metro Vancouver, there's like different CSOs are owned by Metro Vancouver or the City of Vancouver. So those run by Metro Vancouver, they do let you know. They have, if you can find the website, Imogen, and maybe throw that in the chat. They have an alert system now for when those CSOs are overflowing. But the ones in, I think closer to our beaches are owned by the City of Vancouver. So they're working on at least getting that reporting out there. But what's considered like heavy rainfall and might still impact water quality, even if the CSOs aren't overflowing, but just, like stormwater runoff might be collecting, whatever's on the beach. They say anything greater than 5 millimeters. So.
And the other question is, all this water quality measuring and all these warning signs, is it working? Are very many people getting sick from swimming in English Bay, for example? Or are there any records about that?
That's a great question. Imogen, do you know?
I'm not sure that we would have the data on that in particular. I know that beaches are closed more often than not as a precautionary measure. So I think by and large people obey those beach closures, but there have been American studies on recreational water quality, but that's obviously United States based. I haven't seen any data on this as a local kind of issue, but that's something to look into for sure. That's a great question.
And then there's just one last question, if I may, and that is quite a few people that I've been talking to that are regular open water swimmers, there you are, end up drinking quite a bit of water while they're swimming, let's say on healthy days, and it doesn't seem to bother them. But is it a problem when the water is, drinking seawater?
Everything in moderation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, on healthy days, you're not at that risk of those same illnesses.
So you're not, if you're not sick right away, and if you're fine, you're probably fine over the long term too. Is that right? If you're a regular swimmer, constantly drinking just a little bit of seawater, it's probably okay. Okay, all right. And then I had one last question for Stewart, and that was a few ambitious swimmers have been scratching their chins and going, hey, should we swim from Jericho over to West Van, through all the freighters, and past the mouth of the Lionsgate Bridge there? Is that a good idea?
Well, I wouldn't go anywhere near the Lionsgate Bridge. Water there, very, very strong currents.
Right.
Obviously, a lot of boat traffic going through there as well. So no. No. In other words, don't do it. Not advised. Okay. Listen, thank you all very, very much. Wow, we timed it perfectly. That was so interesting. And so that brings us to the end of our presentations. But to wrap things up, is Craig, Stewart,
still here for a few closing remarks and also to announce the winner of the Swim Buddy draw.
I think he needs to be unmuted, maybe.
Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
The host has a bit of a control of that as well. So yes, I'm here. What a great talk. What a great conversation. There was a lively chat going on in the chat. So much good information that is all part of the piece of, can I get into my ocean down there and how do I feel about doing that? You know, I don't have the results from the raffle draw. I don't know how that would happen. Not yet.
I can share that with you. I can share that with you if you like.
Or
Patricia Hooligan.
Hey, somebody had a great comment in the chat room. So congratulations, Patricia.
Patricia, are you still connected? If you could send a little chat to say that you're still here.
Yeah, she's still connected.
Excellent. Okay, well, congratulations to Patricia.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Great presentation.
There's nothing else I really want to add. I was looking back, Sylvie was talking to me about this, and I wanted to find out how many times we had to cancel a practice swim at Kitts Beach. And it was twice in 2018. It was 3 times in 2019. There's a few things happening, including the smoke from the wildfires. But as far as I know, all of those beach closures were because of water quality. And so I love to say it's so great to swim in the local ocean unless there's been a recent sewage runoff, unless there's smoke inhalation possibilities. Like, you know, it drives me crazy that, you know, you can't just go into the ocean and feel like you're safe, given all the safety precautions that Coach Stewart has elaborated on. So thanks for the talk, everybody.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That wraps it up. Have a good night.